What's up guys, it's your boy Wolf back with another 7 Deadly Sins Origins video. In this video, as you figured out by now from the title and thumbnail, we are talking about Sector 2 of Timespace Junction, releasing in just a couple of days, and what you need to know, what units you might want to have built to make sure you're ready for this. As always, if this kind of content helps you out or you enjoy it, take a moment to support me and the channel by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and clicking on the notification bell so you know when a new video goes live. Alright, so this guys is the 7DS Origins Netmarble game news. So as you can see, they updated this on the 29th of April, so last Wednesday. They added the information for the Sector 2 unlock. So as you can see, Sector unlock schedule, Sector 2 is May 6th, Wednesday at 7 AM UTC. So that's basically reset time wherever you are. For me, that's 11 AM. But in 2 days at the time of recording, we are getting Sector 2. So now that we know it's coming, which we kind of always knew it was coming, let's look at what we need to know to be ready for this boss. So here we are guys, this is the 7DS Origins community database. I'll have a link to this in the description below for anyone that wants it. But basically we're looking at this site because these guys have done some incredible work data mining information from the game. They're very committed, and thanks to them we are now able to see some more information about some of the future bosses. So if we scroll down, Timespace Junction, we're on season 1. As you can see, it still has the information for the first sector, which has recommended heroes Fire Escanor, Holy King, Holy Mani. And we have all the information that you can see from the boss that we have that we already know, which is Marmus. Recommended power, recommended elements, Fire and Dark. It had 3.7 million HP. So for anyone that's wondering, if you're able to like do a 2-minute clear basically to get the 3 stars, you can kind of use that HP to work out what your DPS is with that team. You can see all the rewards that we managed to get from the first boss, as well as all the resistances. It's resistant to everything but dark and fire. And thanks to the data mining efforts of some very committed people, we can see boss number 2, which apparently is both the Red Demon and the Great Demon. So we'll be fighting both of them. So again, recommended power apparently is the same. Whether that's going to change when this goes live or not, we don't know. I mean, let's be honest guys, a lot of this could change. This is obviously data mined information. We assume usually as per the leakers that these are correct, but things could still change. Recommended elements, this is where it gets really important. Recommended elements for Sector 2 is Holy and Ice. Now we kind of knew about Holy because if you have been paying attention to the 7DS Origins news in this past week, there have been murmurings that the next one was going to be Holy Weakness. And if you're like me, and if you really thought about it and you may have had the same kind of guesses, you might have figured out Ice as well. Why Ice? Because currently, outside of the Scorpion Toad field bosses, no content has an Ice weakness. Like, outside of those 2 field bosses, there isn't a real need for ice units in the game, and you don't really need to worry about weaknesses with the field bosses because they're so easy to beat and you can basically one-shot them most of the time, so you don't actually have to worry about using the right elements. If you check across the boss challenges, every element is represented at least once except ice. And with the dungeons, there's no wind or ice weakness, but we do have wind weakness on the boss challenges, which means that across the major content that we tackle daily, ice is the only one that has kind of no use at the moment. So this boss is finally giving that to us. With Sector 2, we finally have a reason to have and build those ice units. So those of you of Jericho, maybe you re-rolled for her, it's your time to shine. Looking at the actual boss, it seems to be both the Red Demon and the Grey Demon. Red Demon has 2.4 million HP and the Grey Demon has 1.5 million. Now, whether this means that we fight them both at the same time or one after the other is still unconfirmed. I'm honestly not sure which would be better when I think about it. I think that both at the same time would be kind of annoying because you're kind of having to like watch out for 2 different sets of mechanics flying about coming at you at the same time. But once you get comfortable with the fight, it might be better for faster times if you can kind of like do the fight in a way where you can kind of kill them or whittle them both down at the same time. But on the other hand, fighting one after another would be easier as a fight, but would probably be harder and more clutch to get the timings for the actual clearing. So as you can see, the boss does have higher total HP compared to Marmus. Marmus at 3.7 million. These 2 have a combined, I mean, technically over here, when you add these 2 up, it's 3.9. But over here it says 4 million, so is it 4 million or is it 3.9? I don't know. But either way, it does have more HP than Marmus, which is to be expected. It is Sector 2. It is meant to be more difficult than the first boss. I would expect that as you progress through the time-space junction across these 6 sectors, that the difficulty increases with each one, which is why obviously we went from a single boss in Fight 1 with 3.7 million HP to 2 bosses in the second one, which have less HP each boss individually, but combined have more HP than the first one. Now, another thing to note is that in accordance with the fact that they have more HP and there's 2 bosses to fight now, making it harder than Marmus, which is what you'd expect, the timings are a bit more lenient as well than with Marmus. So with Marmus, if we go back, as you know, for the 1, 2, and 3 stars respectively, it was 4 minutes 30 for a 1 star, 3 minutes for a 2 star, and then 2 minute clear for the 3 star. Comparatively, this one actually gives you 6 minutes for the 1 star, 4 minutes 30 for the 2 star, and 3 minutes 30 for the 3 star, which means that you have an extra minute 30 seconds than you did with Marmus to get 3 stars. Doesn't mean that you'll have more breathing room, because obviously this boss will be harder. There's 2 bosses, so it might still end up being quite clutch. But the time is an indicator. I mean, you do technically have more time than in Marmus, but the fact that they've increased the time to give you a bit more leniency is also an indicator of the fact that they're expecting this boss to be harder and to take a bit longer than the Marmus fight did. Now the rewards as well, if we look at the rewards, for the most part they look the same. You've got the same first clear rewards, 300 star fragments. The 1 star is also 200 fragments, 500,000 gold if you look at the both of them. 3 star as well, you've got the same brilliant engraving seal and remnants of the rift. The 2 star rewards are where it changes. With Marmus, we had the 3 large cube key bundles, 150 keys, and we got 5 SSR limit break stones. Now with this Sector 2 one, if this is correct and this stays accurate when it goes live, we're getting the 150 keys, but we're getting 3 of the Radiant Capture Potions instead. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I definitely would have preferred to get more SSR limit break stones. I kind of only have 1 pet left to get anyway, excluding the paid shop pets. Of the free-to-play ones that you can get, or the hidden ones and whatever with the spawn times, out of all of those, there's only 1 that I have left to get, and that's the squirrel. And I honestly don't even care that much about getting the squirrel anymore, because I have the new fish, which is the best glider in the game. If I get the squirrel, it's mainly just for completion, so that I have every pet, like every free pet unlocked. So I kind of wish that this was still more limit break stones, but for some of the other players out there, this might be a nice welcome addition, giving us more ways to get these potions for free rather than having to buy them from bundles or through the skin banner. But that being said, we've got all this information. You can see the HP, you can see the elements. Obviously, ice and holy are the weaknesses. Everything else is resistant, so you don't want to use anything but ice and holy units, except for a few units that we'll mention when we talk about the teams. So that being said, let's jump back into the game and take a quick look at which units you might want to have and build for this fight. Now, I know I said let's jump back into the game, but unfortunately the first unit we need to talk about is the only unit I still don't actually have. So we're back on the Community DB site to take a look at the first character that you might want to have in preparation for this fight, and that is Jericho. Why Jericho? Because particularly with her dual swords build, Jericho is a beast at triggering Ice Burst. And as we know from the Marmus fight as well, from just most fights in general, you want to be making sure that you're activating the bursts that they are weak to. It is going to help your damage, particularly if you're using Escanor Holy as your DPS as well, and we'll mention this in a second about why. But Jericho is a unit that you will probably want to have. She is best with her dual swords, particularly for this fight that's coming up as well, if the information is accurate. I'm always going to preface if the information is accurate, because these are obviously leaks and data mined information. I don't want to tell anyone that it's definite, because things could always change when it finally goes live. So let's assume that it is correct, but let's also take it with a grain of salt. But in preparation for this fight, assuming that we do want ice and holy units, Jericho is going to be one of the units you want. She's going to be essentially this fight's version of what we used Gila for in the previous fight, and that is to trigger a burst, make sure that there is always a burst active on the boss. How is she doing that? Well, with her dual swords build, obviously she's got this passive Frozen Edge. Activating the hero's cold burst decreases the enemy's cold resistance. Now that's not going to matter too much depending on who you use as your main DPS, but it's still a nice bonus to have. Mainly it comes down to her skills. So as you can see, her, which one is it? This, oh, it's got it the other way around than I'm used to. But her skill gains Frozen Saber for 10 seconds. Inflicts damage equal to 161% of attack. And what Frozen Saber is going to do is, using a normal attack, teleports the hero behind the enemy to inflict additional damage equal to 15% of attack and increase their burst gauge by 20. So, and if you look at the number, 354 for burst. So this is going to help insanely with basically triggering your burst. You basically pop this, do normal attacks, and it's going to keep teleporting you behind the enemy so that you can keep doing extra additional damage and triggering more burst. And then you pair that with the Q, the special attack, inflicts damage equal to 101% of attack, and the final strike additionally increases the burst gauge by 300 while Frozen Saber is active. So it already has a base of 132 for the burst gauge, but it does an additional 300 as long as you use this after the Q. Now, the next thing you want to make sure you're pairing that with, if you do use Jericho as a burst unit in general and for this fight, is you want to make sure that you are crafting this engraving here, the Holy Knight with the star-shaped visor. That's the one that requires the Star Guardian materials to craft. Why is this one the best one for the burst build? Each back attack increases the burst gauge by 30 and decreases cold burst resistance by 3% for 10 seconds, up to a max of 30%. That's at level 3, by 2% for 10 seconds to a max of 20%. So it stacks up to 10 times, and it's decreasing cold burst resistance and increasing burst gauge. And obviously we know from her E that when you activate the E, you gain Frozen Saber. Your normal attacks automatically teleport you behind the enemy. So now this is going to make sure when you pop your E, it's going to make sure that you're constantly triggering this passive from the engraving, which means that you're going to automatically get this cold burst resistance down on the enemy. You're also going to be increasing your burst gauge. This paired with her build is going to help you stack that cold burst so fast. She might be one of, if not the fastest burst unit in the game right now. So if you are going to use Jericho for this fight, make sure that you have this engraving made and ready for her. Now, when it comes to her weapons, another thing we want to talk about, this is the weapon page again on the Community DB website. Now, obviously, there is the obvious choice. You can use the Black Flames weapons. This is the SSR crafted one, which is going to give you the Black Flame energy. Activating a burst increases attack and crit chance, which is really nice, obviously. But remember that this effect only activates for the person who activates the burst, which means that once Jericho activates burst, if you switch to a different unit, you won't still have this buff active on whichever unit you switch to. So only Jericho is going to get this buff, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. I mean, this still does give her some damage. It gives her a good amount of attack. It gives her crit damage, and you get this effect. So for that short amount of time, if you're still using Jericho, say you're using Jericho, you're keeping her out to try and get the chill stacks to activate the Frozen, her damage will be buffed, and any extra damage is nice. But another weapon that would be useful to have is the Skyborn Gale Dual Swords, which is an SR weapon. Now you're probably looking at that and thinking, wait, that's a fire damage weapon. Why do we want that? Because back attacks decrease crit resistance by 16% for 20 seconds. Obviously, with Jericho's build, you're always doing back attacks. So if you pair that with this sword, because we don't really care about Jericho's damage as much as we care about her ability to trigger the burst, if you pair that with this weapon, then you're reducing the enemy's crit resistance as well, which means that now when you swap the next DPS unit in, the enemy now has reduced crit resistance. It's going to enable you to do more crit damage, get more critical hits in, do a lot more damage with your DPS unit. So I personally might actually have this. If you do have this, then you might want to try and upgrade this to the max limit broken state, level 7 if you can. It's going to decrease crit resistance by 40% for 20 seconds. And as you know, decreasing crit resistance of the enemy is the same as giving yourself crit chance. Crit resistance is like the anti-crit crit chance, the same way that crit defense is the anti-crit damage. By reducing someone's crit defense, you're giving yourself crit damage. By reducing someone's crit resistance, you're giving yourself crit chance. So back attacks decrease crit resistance by 40% for 20 seconds. That is the same as giving yourself 40% crit chance for 20 seconds. So that is really, really good when you pair it with Jericho's build that automatically triggers back attacks to trigger the burst really quickly. So you can press her E, press her Q, spam a bunch of normal attacks, teleport behind, get the back attacks, trigger the cold burst, reduce their crit resistance, and then swap into a DPS unit to do big damage. So that's something that you might want to consider if you have this weapon, if you have the resources to either craft this weapon, or if you already have it, to then limit break this to the maximum. So that is Jericho. That's just one of the units, but let's look at the other units that you might want to have. Now we're back in the game, and now we can look at the other units. So the first one that we're going to look at, well, the second one technically after Jericho, is Manny. Now, depending on what you have, what you've summoned for, Manny is an option to use for 2 reasons on this team. Now, you might, if you don't have a better DPS option, you could use Manny with her longsword build as an ice DPS. It is a good build. And I think that if you have this weapon specifically, using a jet black longsword has really good synergy with this build, especially if you can limit break it, because the way this build works is attacking an enemy with cold burst activated increases crit chance and crit damage. She gets 18% crit chance, 45% crit damage. Let's assume you pair that with Jericho, who's triggering the ice burst, and you get the Skyborn swords. Imagine that you're decreasing their crit resistance by 40%. That's the same as now having a 58% crit chance extra with Manny. So if you build even a small amount of crit chance on her, you can probably hit crit cap really easily. And then her build, her ultimate creates an area for 10 seconds where the hero's cold damage increases by 40%, and enemies take damage every second for the duration. So you want to be triggering this before your combo. Basically, you want to come into the fight. Once you trigger a burst with Jericho, you come into the fight with Manny, you hit the enemy, you get your crit chance and crit damage, you ult so that you can get the 40% increased cold damage, and then you do your combo of you hit your E. This is going to do damage, and it's going to give you frost, where adds sword blasts to your normal attacks, inflicting damage equal to 45% of attack, and landing it 15 times allows the use of frost strike, which makes you immune to reactions while casting, which is nice because this means that you're immune to like knockups and stuns and stuff. And then it inflicts a big amount of damage, and then her Q in between is just an extra bit of damage. So it's basically you come activate cold burst, come in with Manny, ult, then use your E, throw your Q in there in between, do a bunch of normal attacks, and then do your E again when you hit 15 times. So that's why I kind of like the jet black longsword on this build, because it synergizes with builds that need to use your ultimate early on before the main combo. So what this is going to do, especially if you manage to max limit break it, if you get it to the max limit break, you get a 20% chance to increase your crit chance by 80%. Technically, you won't even need to maximize this to really get the full benefit, because the duration doesn't change, the chance doesn't change, it's just the amount of crit chance. But with Jericho, if you use the Skyborn swords, you are getting 40% from that, plus the 80% from Manny's passive, that's 58%. You could probably even keep this at level 1 or 2 to get like capped crit. But what this is going to do is it's going to give you a chance to get an insane amount of crit chance once you use your ultimate. So if you manage to proc that, then you'll basically hit crit cap. Then when you do your combo, when you proc your E and you do a bunch of normal attacks, you are going to do some insane amount of crit damage. So Manny, if you don't have another option, is a really good option with a longsword build for a main ice DPS. The other reason you might use her, if you have a different DPS unit to use, namely Escanor, then you might want to use Manny with her Holy Spec, because obviously this is tried and true. Everyone knows the Holy Spec is one of, if not the best buffer in the game. She's going to come in, she's going to drop her Q, which is the main function of this. She's going to give you crit damage, she's going to give you magic charging efficiency. Her punishment is going to give you an extra bit of damage. It does inflict holy damage, 3% of damage dealt every 0.4 seconds for 15 seconds. So you are going to get some dot damage out of this. Increases ultimate move damage by 30% when an allied hero attacks an enemy affected by punishment. And landing a normal attack additionally restores the magic gauge and increases your combined attack damage. It's a nice passive to have, but obviously the main focus of this whole Holy Spec build is the Q. That's what we use her for. She's going to give us crit damage and magic charging efficiency. Now, if we look at the next unit that you will probably want to have, if you summon for Escanor, this might be your number 1 choice for a main DPS for this fight, is Holy Greatsword Escanor. The amount of damage that this build does is so good. I love this build. I almost love it more than I love the Fire Axe. For me personally, the Fire Axe didn't really feel like it came online until I got a massive amount of dupes. As you can see from the potentials, my Escanor is 910 now. I only bought 2 bundles. I spent £45 on this. I bought the 2 bundles, kind of like the special summons bundles from the bundles part. The one of the bundles giving you 1 multi, the other bundle giving you 2 multis. So I basically only bought 3 multis worth of bundles to summon for Escanor, but I got insanely lucky. By the time I hit the 120 guaranteed, my Escanor was already at a 610. And then I had, once I hit the 610 at 120, one more round, one more set of 80 pulls to the next pity would have been a guaranteed Escanor, but only 40 pulls later. If you look at the screenshot I'm showing you now, I got really lucky and I got a pull with 2 Escanors, and then I had enough to trade to buy 1 copy from the store. So that's how my Escanor is 910. I might stop there. I don't know if I want to pull for the 1010, but my fire axe didn't come online until then. But we're kind of going off topic. The point is, Holy Escanor is insane. It is very good. You will want to use the Black Flame Wings Greatsword. There isn't really a weapon that has an insane synergy with this build. This is the best weapon. You're going to get good amount of base attack. You're going to get crit damage from this. If you plan your fights in a certain way, depending on the boss, depending on the fight, you could play it out in a way where Escanor does activate the burst to get this Black Flame energy. I do try and do that sometimes in Furs and Mines. I use Drake and Manny to try and get the burst just below completely full, and then usually I can do it in a way where triggering Escanor's tag skill will finish off the burst so that I can get Black Flame energy. But that's very like kind of nitpicking, trying to like min-max the setup and everything. But it does have good damage on this weapon. His build obviously increases all allied heroes dot damage by 120. So if you pair that with Manny's punishment, her punishment now, the dot from her E is going to be doing more damage. And then when attacking a burned enemy, damage increases by 30% for every stack. Decreases damage taken from burned enemies by 15%. As you know, burn stacks up to 5 times, so we're getting up to 150% increased damage from this. The E, inflicts damage and then decreases burn damage trigger interval by 50% for 10 seconds. So this is making our burns tick twice as fast basically for 10 seconds. On top of that, once you stack your burn up to 5 times, you want to use your Q. This is going to give weaken stacks, 1 weaken for each burn. So you can get up to 5 weaken stacks, which each stack increases dot taken by 5%. So you want to basically normal attack a bunch of times to get the burns up to 5 times. Then use a Q to get the 5 weaken stacks to increase the dot damage taken. Then use your E to trigger the increased the burn acceleration damage. And then obviously you have your ultimate, which does a large amount of damage, 390%. And when you attack a burned enemy, damage increases by 2% for every 1 defense reduction stack, which is really nice because obviously burn ticks. Every time a burn damage ticks, it triggers 1 defense reduction stack on the enemy. Defense reduction stacks can stack up to 100 times. And provided you're using Escanor, this is the engraving you want to and will be using. Each hit on a burned enemy inflicts 4 additional stacks of defense reduction caused by burn, and attacking a burned enemy increases holy damage. So this is going to help you stack that defense reduction caused by the burn up to 100 much quicker, which means that if you manage to ult when you have 100 defense reduction stacks, then you're doing an damage increases by 200% basically. So Escanor will probably be the best damage dealer for this fight. He's going to be doing dot damage. He's going to be doing like straight up flat damage, big damage from his Q, his E, his ultimate, his normal attacks do a really good amount of damage. So you'll probably want to use this. In terms of other units that you can use if you don't have Escanor, King with his Holy Spec is also a good DPS unit to use. I haven't used him myself, but I have seen a lot of content where people have tackled like Furs and Mines, for example, which has a Holy weakness. With Holy's King, he's very good. He does have very good damage. With his full bloom, he actually stacks, increases attack by 25%, defense shatter by 10%. So he does buff himself up quite a lot. So you can get some really insane damage out of his build. So he is someone that you can use. Other units that you might want to try out, Elaine is an option with her holy build. She's going to help with burst if you need it. You might not need it. She's kind of just there if in case you really need someone to fill in a slot. She does help with triggering burst. She's going to basically inflicts damage. That's inflicts damage in an area, but this one, it's her Q, increases all elemental burst efficiency of allies in range by 30% for 10 seconds. So if you need help trying to trigger the burst even faster, then she can do this. Increases the hero's all elemental burst efficiency by 20% from her passive. So those are kind of like the holy units and ice units that you can use. Obviously, we only have 2 ice units in the game so far, and that's Manny and Jericho. In terms of holy units, the only ones that you really want to maybe consider for this fight are Elaine, if you really need to, but mainly Escanor and King, depending on which one you have built out as a main DPS potentially. Of course, you could always use Manny as a main DPS as well. But another unit that you can obviously consider, as usual, the tried and true safe go-to, Lightning Daisy is still going to be useful in terms of giving us the crit damage buff, in terms of applying her electromagnet from her passive to reduce crit resistance. So this is going to work. If you're using Jericho and you pair it with the Skyborn, if you use her with like the SR weapon that I mentioned, if you have a lot of decreased crit resistance coming from these 2 units, so you could probably get some insane crit damage out of Escanor, or even Manny if you're using her DPS build with that. So those are some of the units that you can consider. Obviously, there's the Slater as well. If you don't have Daisy, you can use Slater with his axe build. He's also going to be using his Q to reduce crit resistance. His passive is obviously going to help you buff your crit damage, so he's another good unit to have as well. So those are kind of the units that you probably want to consider when it comes to this fight. In terms of the team that I plan to use, I'm personally looking to use Escanor, Daisy with her lightning build, Escanor obviously with his Holy Greatsword as my main DPS, Manny as a buffer with her Holy Spec, and then I'll be using Jericho as an Ice Burst unit. And you're probably wondering, well, how am I going to use Jericho? I don't actually have her yet. I'll probably be going to the exchange shop here, and I'll be buying this regular SSR Hero Collection ticket to buy Jericho here. But obviously that's a very pay to win method. If you don't have Jericho yet, then you don't have to use a burst unit. That's the good thing about holy units, is they don't need the burst, but holy units do get a 15% damage buff when attacking an enemy that is in another elemental burst. So whatever elemental burst, it could be ice, it could be holy, it could be whatever. I mean, not holy because holy doesn't have a burst, but it could be ice, it could be fire, it could be whatever element. But if there is an elemental burst active on an enemy, holy units do get, holy and physical units both do get 15% bonus damage against an enemy that is in an active elemental burst. So ideally, if you can, you want to be using a unit that can trigger the ice burst. So like I said, guys, this is the team that I plan to use. Just imagine that instead of Drake, this is Jericho. And that will be the team that I will be using for this upcoming fight. Escanor with my main DPS, Jericho as my cold burst unit, and then Daisy and Manny as my buff supports. So yeah, guys, that's the information that we have. Thank you to the data miners who found this information. Obviously, this helps a lot for people to get ready for the boss in advance. Let me know what you guys think about this upcoming boss fight. How do you think it's going to work out? Do you think that we're going to see 2 bosses at the same time? Is it going to be one after another? What do you think about Sector 2 being both the Red and the Grey Demon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, if you found this content helpful, if you enjoy this kind of content, and just to kind of give me some support, help me get to 1k subs real quick, because we are on a journey to 1k at the moment. We've just crossed 600, another 400 to go, so help me out. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching, guys. I've been Wolf. Peace out.